On 8th September 1945, a locked railcar left a U.S. Army depot in Bavaria, under armed guard, destination omitted. The manifest listed no names, only technical materials. The omission mattered, because this was how Paperclip truly began. Operation Paperclip is remembered as a recruitment program. In practice, it was a race. American and Soviet teams hunted the same engineers, the same notebooks, the same half-burned files before borders hardened and stories fossilized. Captain Eleanor Hayes watched folders arrive already stripped of covers. Pages were missing, staples removed. She noted serial gaps where biographies should have been. The files felt edited before she ever saw them. Declassified War Department memos admit background checks were deferred for strategic necessity. Crimes were noted, then bracketed. A margin note repeats across files. Operational priority supersedes disclosure. The Soviets moved faster in the East, extracting whole institutes overnight. U.S. teams responded by airlifting individuals piecemeal. What could not be moved was photographed, summarized, or quietly destroyed. Hayes logged a recurring code stamped on several folders, not Paperclip blue. The code redirected custody to an unlisted office. When she asked, her supervisor said only, "Those aren't for circulation." Public rosters later named rocket scientists and physicians. Missing were metallurgists, tunnel engineers, and systems organizers. The absences skewed the story, making Paperclip look narrower than it was. CIA assessments from 1946 warned that technical knowledge was contextual. Schematics without methods were useless. The race was not for men alone, but for the habits that made secret programs survive scrutiny. A Joint Chiefs brief admitted files had been sanitized beyond recognition. The word sanitized appears twice, underlined. The implication was clear. The record was being curated, not preserved. If Paperclip has a shadow, it begins here, in what moved without names, and what was erased before historians could count it. By late 1945, U.S. screening centers processed hundreds of Germans, yet internal counts never matched public totals. Discrepancies ranged from dozens to hundreds, explained away as clerical overlap. No reconciliation report was ever issued. Interrogation transcripts show repeated references to associated personnel, who never appeared on transfer lists. When asked for names, interviewees cited standing orders or claimed the individuals were reassigned before surrender. Soviet archives later revealed parallel efforts, codenamed Osoaviakim, that relocated entire research groups overnight. American analysts studying the dumps noticed familiar gaps, as if both sides had reached for the same missing pieces. Captain Hayes flagged one dossier marked complete, but weighing half the expected amount. The index referenced appendices that did not exist. She wrote, "Either removed prior to intake, or diverted after." A 1946 Pentagon audit quietly admitted certain files were held outside normal archival control. The justification cited security, but the memo warned prolonged separation would compromise institutional memory. Scientists brought to the U.S. signed contracts forbidding mention of prior work locations. Several later admitted they had been coached on phrasing, not facts. Avoid specifics appears in orientation notes. Public narratives emphasized rockets and jets. Internal briefs focused on production systems, underground logistics, and secrecy management. One colonel wrote that these skills outlast hardware. A CIA review concluded that the most valuable knowledge was procedural, not theoretical. Blueprints could be copied. Organizational instinct could not. The sentence was highlighted twice. By 1947, requests to declassify early paperclip material stalled. Boxes were listed as misplaced. then reclassified. The paper trail thinned just as oversight increased. What remains is uneven silence, detailed biographies for some, blank space for others. Paperclip's shadow is measured not in what we know, but in what the files refuse to say. In 1947, congressional staff requested a full inventory of paperclip holdings. The response cited ongoing operations and delivered a partial list weeks late. Margins show redactions made after printing, not before, implying last-minute removals. Testimony from Army clerks describes midnight transfers of crates to unmarked offices. Receipts were unsigned. Serial numbers vanished from ledgers the following day, replaced by a single word: relocated. Soviet defectors later claimed U.S. officers asked about engineers never named publicly. The questions focused on coordination roles, not inventions. Who kept the trains running? One officer asked. When the bombs fell, a 1948 CIA estimate warned that missing files could skew attribution of postwar advances. The concern was reputational, not moral. Credit would drift without a record to anchor it. Scientists integrated into American labs noticed parallel directives across agencies, suggesting a shared template. The language matched German administrative styles, down to reporting intervals and compartment rules. An Air Force memo praised rapid program scaling, using inherited methods. The phrase avoided names. Footnotes referenced sources, not available for citation. An unusual admission in formal briefs. Archivists attempting to reconcile collections found duplicate covers with different contents. One box contained only index cards pointing to locations that no longer existed. Another was empty but marked reviewed. By 1950, oversight waned as Cold War urgency hardened. Requests slowed. The gaps became normal. A senior official wrote, "The record now reflects outcomes, not origins." Historians later noted sudden leaps in underground construction, security doctrine, and production resilience. The advances arrived without clear lineage, as if techniques had appeared fully formed. Paperclip's shadow deepened not through secrecy alone, but through normalization. Once omissions became routine, asking after them felt out of place. By the early 1950s, interagency committees cited Paperclip as complete. Yet internal routing slips still carried the diversion code Hayes first noted. The code routed materials to temporary custody, a status that never expired. A Defense Department study on secrecy failures concluded that German compartmentalization methods reduced leaks dramatically. The study omitted sources. Reviewers recognized the structure, but could not trace its adoption. Former clerks recalled burn barrels used not for duplicates, but originals. The justification was speed. One memo authorized destruction to prevent adversarial inference, an elastic phrase applied to entire folders. In 1953, a Senate inquiry stalled after witnesses claimed records had been consolidated. When asked where, agencies disagreed. The hearing ended without subpoenas, citing national security consensus. Soviet intelligence summaries from the same year accused the U.S. of hiding organizational architects. They listed categories: logistics chiefs, underground planners, rather than names mirroring American omissions. A CIA training manual quietly adopted German-style clearance rings and need-to-know cells. The preface praised efficiency. The provenance line read only, "derived from foreign best practices." Researchers noticed that several black programs shared identical reporting cadences and escalation thresholds. The pattern matched late-war German projects more closely than American precedents. An internal Air Force history acknowledged non-documented transfers as unavoidable. The phrase appears once, then disappears from later drafts, replaced by informal cooperation. By mid-decade, Archivists stopped flagging gaps. New accessions arrived already curated. The absence of certain files became an expected feature, not an error. Paperclip's shadow endured because it trained institutions to forget method while keeping results, an amnesia that felt like progress. In 1956, a classified review compared U.S. and Soviet secrecy failures and found parallel improvements after 1947. The report suggested convergent evolution, yet footnotes hinted at shared antecedents, a phrase left unexplained and never expanded. Warehouse inventories from Maryland to New Mexico listed crates marked Legacy Technical. Access logs showed repeated handling without checkout. Inspectors noted contents were consulted, then resealed, as if reference material rather than archives. A Navy memo praised rapid shipyard hardening, using pre-existing continental models. The models were not cited. Engineers recognized the logic immediately, despite no domestic training covering the approach. When journalists pressed for full paperclip lists in the 1960s, agencies produced summaries. Originals were said to be lost to consolidation. FOIA requests returned indices pointing to boxes that could not be located. Soviet historians later published names taken east in 1946. Cross-checks revealed American counterparts absent from U.S. records. The symmetry suggested selection, not chaos, guiding what each side admitted. An internal CIA note warned that reopening files risked revealing procedural inheritance. The concern was not war crimes, but attribution. Who taught whom to disappear information cleanly? By the 1970s, classification guides codified deletion schedules. Entire categories expired without review. Archivists were instructed to preserve outcomes, not pathways, ensuring continuity without confession. Paperclip's shadow is visible where progress appears sudden and undocumented. Not because knowledge vanished, but because the trail was designed to end before it could be followed. If these stories matter, it's because files don't just record history. They decide which histories survive inspection and which are absorbed into silence.